Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for lunch and to Founders and Funding by TechTO. The goal of this weekly session is to learn from founders and funders on how deals came together, what it's like to work with an investor, and discuss strategy and the current fundraising situation. It's also to hear the stories of how a company's grown. Maybe we'll start right now. So why want the three of you just go around? We'll start with Mike. Explain who you are and your background.
Sure. I'm Mike. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ada. We are a Toronto-based customer service automation platform, and we're excited to talk about our funding story. We've been working with Boris for a better part of 6 years now, Boris, something like that. And we've never actually told this story publicly. So we're excited to share it with the community and hopefully impart some lessons to others, and hopefully folks can avoid some mistakes that we made.
David?
Yeah, my name is David. I'm a co-founder of Ada as well and our head of product. And I've been working with Boris as well for 6 years, something like that, and Mike for a little longer. And yeah, excited to tell our story. Nothing else to add.
Cool. And Boris?
Last but not least, Borit Wertz. I'm one of the partners at Version 1 Ventures, former entrepreneur turned investor. Version 1 Ventures is currently investing out of a $57 million early stage fund, our third fund, and we invest in companies at the seed and pre-stage stage, both in the US and Canada.
And do you have any thesis to what you invest in?
Yeah, I mean, our thesis is very much focused on network effect. So traditionally, it has been marketplaces and social platforms. In the last little while, we spent a lot of time on SaaS companies that use data network effects, and so AI and machine learning.
Cool, great. So David and Mike, why don't you tell me what was how you guys got together and how you guys started the company and what it originally was?
Sure.
Well,
Go ahead,
Mike.
David and I started a company called Volley, 6 years ago now, David?
Something like that.
That was really, it was sort of built on this idea of making search on the internet more human. We were really obsessed with the idea of reinventing Google in the era of the social web, where the individual unit of the web had sort of graduated from being a website to being a person. And we built what was at one point a highly engaged community that helped people facilitate introductions to one another around problems that they were solving. And it was through that early prototype and early community that Boris was actually a user, and we met Boris. Do you remember it any differently, David?
No, I just add that, I mean, helping other people build products is something that Mike and I both connected over. That was something that we both had a real sort of love for. And so that's something that brought us together. And Mike actually had been building a little static site on his own, which had no database, no user model, nothing. And it was really, it just blew me away that he was like hacking together in the era of no code when there was no code back then. And so we banded together to make that a reality.
So did you guys know each other beforehand, or did you find Mike through Volley? Or
no, we met through actually a very close mutual friend who knew someone that worked with Mike, and so we were just riffing off of ideas. I think one night over dinner, just a big dinner with a bunch of people talking about what we were building, and that's how Mike and I originally connected. And then he and I both started talking about what he had been working on, and it was mostly over email. Like he was just connecting people over email, trying to help people with their challenges. And it really inspired me. And so we took that, we made that into a product which became Volley.
And how long ago was this?
This was like 6 years ago. And it was maybe longer. It was, David at the time had just moved back from Australia and was working as an engineering consultant in Australia with a geology background, and had been teaching himself to program and had just become obsessive with it. And had made so much progress in a short amount of time that he cold emailed Jeff Tien at Tien and Lax. Jeff now runs Newsfeed at Facebook, and convinced him to hire him. So David was the youngest person that Tien and Lax ever hired. And effectively, David, you were there for what, like a year? And then there was a presentation where I tried to convince you to leave, and eventually we did, and then we started Volley together.
Cool.
Yeah, I still have that presentation.
And so you said that Boris was a user, early adopter. Boris, how did you find them? How did you get involved?
No, funny enough, I mean, I found them through another portfolio company of ours. We had a tool called Mattermark that we invested in that helped VCs find companies that have traction. And I had an upcoming trip to Toronto. I looked at kind of what are the companies with traction in Toronto. And, the Mattermark algorithm spat out Volley, and was one of the top 3 companies at that moment that had tons of traction. So I reached out to Mike and said, like, I would love to learn more. And that's kind of how we had the initial conversation.
I got to ask the question. Did you play with the product first and were a user, or did you just reach out?
I don't fully remember that anymore, but I very quickly got into the community and used the product, and was an active part. But I'm pretty sure probably the first conversation was just with Mike.
And Mike, at that time when Boris reached out, were you guys looking for money, or what was your reaction? Did you know who Boris was?
I did know who Boris was. We were working out of the DMZ at the time, on the 6th floor, and we'd never raised venture capital before. And we were just beginning to have some sort of early venture discussions. And so the timing was pretty good.
And so what happened? You guys met, check right there instantaneously?
Yeah, Boris wrote a $10 million check within 30 seconds of talking on the phone.
He played with the product and he was so blown away.
It was a series of conversations with Boris and Angela over many weeks. At the time we were really focused on demonstrating Ada's virality and proving the network effects thesis that we had, and which aligned very closely with version 1's network effects thesis themselves. And I think we got to know each other quite well, and ultimately felt like, hey, this would be really fun to partner and continue to build together. And
but having said that, I remember one conversation where our initial feedback was, hey, listen, we love what you guys are building. There's some real traction in Toronto, but it just feels like too early for us. And then we're about to pretty much pass, but Mike on that call jumped back and no, pushed back and gave us a really good story why this wasn't too early. This wasn't too immature, and you turned us around that call.
Interesting, Mike. If you remember those words, maybe we can get them out and put them out, share them with every other founder, so they know what the magic words were.
I don't remember the words. I do remember getting a phone call from Boris and being very disappointed at the end of the phone call.
I remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you turned Boris around, and was that? I guess Boris would be leading that round. Tell us, was this? My guess at that time was a relatively small round. What was the idea when you were raising that money? How much? What were you supposed to do with Volley?
So at that time, Volley, we raised a $500,000 pre-seed round. Version 1, Boris and Angela took the entire round. And
wait, there's a backstory to that. We said we would take 400,000 of the 500,000. We introduced you to, I think, like 5 or 6 angels, right? And everybody passed, and nobody wants to take the remaining 100,000. So we said, okay, screw everybody else. We'll take the whole amount. But at the time, we thought it would be. We had a few value-add angels that we hoped would kind of join the round. Nobody wants to join the round, so ultimately we ended up taking the whole 500,000.
This I remember. Great point, Boris. So Boris teed up all these incredible angels who belong proven operators who have built some amazing products and businesses themselves, and David and I met with them each, and really actually garnered a deep understanding of the polite Canadian no. And there was a deep desire, I think, from these people to actually help, but no one wanted to actually participate. Interesting.
So Boris stepped up, which was impressive, because I most VCs, when I see they can't close the round, get kind of scared. So you raise $500,000. You go to build Volley as a world-beating startup. So obviously it didn't happen. What happened?
David?
I mean, we built something that we were pretty proud of, first of all. So the product was, I think, pretty excellent, and the community was pretty strong too. And strong in the sense of it wasn't necessarily as wide as we intended it to be. It wasn't everywhere. It was very strong within Toronto, and it had certain pockets and localities to it. And that was the problem. The problem was that I don't think we could see how we were going to grow that at a meaningful clip that we would have to. And on top of that, we really looked at, okay, finally we have some time to really think long term, because before that we didn't have enough runway to even think like 3 years into the future. So finally we actually had a moment where we were like, okay, we've got an iOS app, a web app, we've got a community of around 10,000 people who are using this thing. What does this look like in 3 years? And what we realized was it was like an advertising platform. And we love that community so much that, I mean, for me, I'm speaking for you, Mike, but I had a couple conversations like this that we were like, it doesn't feel right. It's not the spirit of what we were trying to build. And so that was definitely a moment where we were concerned because our energy wouldn't necessarily be where it needed to be for a long term. That was for me, at least, a big part of the decision to stop. Mike, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I think, the community effectively, the value of the community diminished as the community expanded across geographies. And so, in many ways, even, there were negative network effects actually in Volley. And even though we saw we started to see some meaningful, user growth, as we grew, the quality of the community, like the GMV of this marketplace, deteriorated. And that was a real challenge for us. And I would say that, reflecting back on that, as David's co-founder in this, I really learned the difference between commitment and attachment in building a business. I learned that we were incredibly attached to the idea of Volley. And I've since learned that could be very dangerous in building something in the early days. So and instead, what's a much more productive psychology is to be incredibly committed to an outcome, but not married to how you get there. And it was certainly that lesson that I think, very much held true in our pursuit of what became Ada.
So I'm going to cut to Boris. Boris, as I guess an investor, you're not there day to day. What were you thinking through this, and how were you being kept informed? I guess when you hear this negative network effects, it sounds like it's your antithesis here. So
yeah, no, I mean, listen, we're usually connecting with our founders at least on a bi-weekly basis around kind of what's on top of their mind, what's their challenges, how can we help, and certainly I think it became pretty clear that that the expansion beyond Toronto was not as trivial as we thought, right? But the good news is that there was always a very honest conversation around it, in terms of where we stand, what do we need to improve, what can we still do. So it didn't come as a shock. I mean, this is a gradual process. You learn more about how the platform works. You learn more about the challenges, and this is not you wake up one night and say like, oh my God, like everything that we believed before is not valid anymore. I think for both of us, or three of us, kind of that's a gradual process of just adjusting expectations and learning how the product works or it doesn't.
Okay, so it's not working. David and Mike, what did you decide to do, and how did you communicate to all the different stakeholders?
Well, I think we went back. First of all, we went to our investors and said like we don't want to work on this anymore. We're not going to work on this anymore. We just don't think this is going to be successful. And let's hold
up there, because I think that's an important. Let's not gloss over that, because that was a difficult conversation to have.
Oh yeah, it was like the hardest. I think it's the hardest conversation I think you and I have ever had for sure.
Mm.
And it was multi-day too. Like this isn't like okay, let's go have lunch. This is like, whoa, like this is serious. Like there was many heart-to-hearts, many walks. Mike, why don't you elaborate more on it?
Yeah, I mean, David and I effectively made the call. And by the way, we had a team of about 8 to 10 people at this point. And we made the decision that this ultimately wasn't working and that it was in the best interest of the business for us to work on something different. And I still remember this lunch, but I was so nervous about communicating this to Boris, our lead investor, that I had typed out exactly and printed out exactly what I wanted to communicate and the plan that David and I had aligned to around how we were going to approach our second act. And we had met at Fresh on Spadina. This would have been four years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago. And we sat down at lunch. I still think of this. I was so nervous. Across all these meetings I've since had and these big enterprise deals and everything, this continues to be probably the most nerve-wracking meeting I've ever walked into. And I, with the paper in hand, I sat down and met Boris at lunch. I couldn't order anything to eat. And Boris asked, how's everything going? And I said, I put the paper on the table and I slid it across the table. And I said, Boris, Volley's not working. We just let everybody go and we're hoping to work on something new. I completely understand if you want your remaining capital back. And what Boris said is that he first of all, he didn't look at the paper. He maintained eye contact with me and he said, well, what are our ideas? What are we going to do next? And first of all the anxiety left my body. And then I started riffing with Boris on the ideas that David and I had about the challenges of delighting customers at scale and the difficulty of scaling customer service and just the general area that ultimately became Ada. And Boris said, well, why don't you meet these 2 or 3 people who I know at Shopify who probably are facing this exact problem? And 10 seconds later, facilitated an email introduction, right after I've communicated this. And fast forward 12 months, those people turned into customers of Ada. Shopify became a customer of Ada. So, I think that for me, it's that story that I think really highlights what it means to invest in founders first, and has been, something that David and I, just value unbelievably when we think about our relationship with Boris and Angela and version 1.
So I have a bunch of different questions for you, but I want to go to Boris. Do you remember that lunch?
I remember that lunch, but not in that detail. Because for me, it was like the natural reaction. And as Mike said, ultimately at the early stage, you invest in founders. You don't invest in ideas. Idea is a part of it, right? But that there's a big likelihood it's either not going to work out, or you have to pivot, or to change it very dramatically, right? And so we've been in a bunch of these situations where the reality is that the idea we invested in doesn't work out, but we backed a certain founding team that we think can figure something else out. Pivots are super hard, and it doesn't mean that every pivot works as successfully as Ada did. This is like an incredibly successful outcome to date. But ultimately, we always feel like we back the founding team, and we want to back them as long as they're excited about working on something that could potentially be valuable.
So, thanks. That's a great insight there. Now. You went from this lunch to the idea of Ada. You said it took about 12 months. So just really high level, I'll start with David. You have to come up with a product completely different than what you were doing. How do you go about doing this?
It's a great question. Well, so Mike alluded to it, but essentially what we did was, I think we, first of all, 50% expected that Boris would be like, great, I'll have the 100K back, which was about what we had left, maybe a little bit more. And he didn't, and Angela didn't. They leaned into us. And like Mike said, that was a huge moment for us. So we really suddenly were like, we have to make this work, like, because we want to do right by these people who have partnered with us and trusted us to build something great. That was the first thing. So we wrote out how much cash we had in the bank on the wall of our office, which is crappy, like, oh my God, it's on Lakeshore and Leslie. Like I walk by it all the time because I live in the neighborhood. And anyway, it was like this crappy little place, but we wrote it on the wall and we said, okay, this is how much we have left. And that's how much runway we have. And we have to figure out something that's going to fit in that time. It was very scary.
Days remaining. Every day we walked into the office, one of us would cross out a day and put the number left.
And we didn't have a year, by the way. This wasn't 12 months. We had 90 days. Okay. I have a picture of it. 90 days. And I don't think Boris knows this. So I don't think he knew how close to the metal we actually were. But anyway, so what we did was we started talking furiously with people about what problems they were having. And these were all people that we met through Volley, which was like the best part of the whole story. We met tons of founders, VPs of product, people working on all kinds of stuff. And we talked to them, and it validated a lot of the ideas that we had around delighting customers at scale. But they also gave us a whole bunch of information that we had no idea about. And so we started furiously hacking on improving customer support at scale. That was something that we honed in on. Everybody talked about it as either a huge cost, or they were dissatisfied with the tools. They couldn't leverage things well. They couldn't leverage the team well. It was all around customer support. The writing was on the wall. I'm surprised not more people weren't seeing it for some reason. So that was one of our best moves, I think, is talking to many, many people at many different companies about what problems they were having. And then those people, like Mike said, became our customers. This is Simple, Wattpad, Shopify. And we figured out what to build by actually being customer support agents in some of their dashboards. And I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about that, because I think that was his idea and it was genius.
Cool. Just one side note, we'll be getting to questions from the chat soon. I see Julia's asked a couple. We'll come back to them. But do want to spend maybe go a few minutes more than allocated to get a bit more of the story. So, tell us a bit more your side of Mike. So you're doing all the customer interviews. You're talking to people.
We had learned through Volley that supporting customers at scale is really hard. And David and I are two very product-oriented people. We've long treated customer service as a means of improving our product. And I think everyone in the chat can resonate with the experience of providing product feedback and actually having a business take it seriously and actually push a change when you receive that feedback. It's the most magical thing in software development. And that wasn't working for us as we were growing Volley. So, as David mentioned, we just spoke with as many people as we could. We cold called as many VPs of customer service and customer experience as we possibly could.
So I'll drop Julia's question here. How many people do you think you interviewed in that time? Is it
Everyone
10, 50?
Maybe 20, I don't know.
Okay. 50,
You think, Mike? Any more?
A lot. We kept doing it until we heard the same answers over and over again, and we could anticipate people's problems, and we could speak really as experts to them about their own problems. That's when we sort of stopped. And then we went back to those people and we said, can we join your teams? And all these VPs of customer experience were like, sure. And which we were pretty surprised about. And so David and I were customer service agents from this dingy Leslieville office for 8 different customer service teams at the same time. And David was personally handling close to 30% of 500 Pixels customer service himself. And we were just all hours of the night, all hours of the day, answering as many inquiries as we possibly could. And that experience, I would say, taught us 3 key things. We learned that 30% or more of the inquiries we were responding to were repetitive, mundane questions. Like in some cases, it was as high as 80%, depended on the company. Which was surprising, right? If you're joining a new company, typically you assume it's going to take you weeks to onboard and understand the value proposition and actually support end customers. Instead, we were actually providing value from day one. So many of these inquiries are simple. Secondly, we learned that the agent experience of responding to customers inside the tech that they were in, the Zendesk, Service Clouds, Genesises of the world, we just felt like it was really negative. The software wasn't designed to improve the agent experience and the agent productivity. It was designed to sell seats. And there was thus a disconnect between the incentive of the software vendor and the incentive of the agent, or the goal of the agent. And that really bothered us. And we effectively, David, you summed it up as like, look, this product sucks. That's pretty much what you said. And then the third,
I think so, yeah.
well, okay, that's what we both felt. We just felt like the product quality bar was low. And the third thing we learned was that everyone wanted to offer messaging and live chat support, but they couldn't afford to, because they're taking 24 hours to respond to an email, and an hour and a half to pick up the phone in the best case. And it was really through that manual effort that we started to hack together Ada and improve its value.
So
yeah, we took rotations. So Mike would do business development. I would do support for customers like 500 Pixels. Then we would flip, and I would hack on Zendesk APIs or our own stuff and figure out if there was a product that could be built to improve the agent experience. And we tried about 3 different things before we found any fit at all. But anyway, just wanted to add that.
So this is what I'm hearing. 90 days left, numbers on the wall. You're doing a bunch of interviews, doing customer support, and building a product. So take us to how you knew you had something that can be financeable, and that you knew what you want to do, and how you raise that round. And
well, the first milestone was to generate $1 in revenue. That was a huge thing. David and I had never made $1 through software before. Volley,
I think it's really important to talk about, because that drove us crazy.
Mm-hmm.
When we were building Volley, it drove us crazy because we get product feedback from people who weren't paying for our product. They're paying with their attention and their time. And we build what they told us to build, or something similar, and they still would, the retention number wouldn't move. It was driving us crazy. So I think there's a lot of that in building social products and two-sided marketplaces. And so what we said was, okay, whatever we're building next is going to be valued with dollars, because people don't pay for stuff they don't use. And that was something that we set as our first milestone, like Mike said, $1. I think it was $1 or something like that, maybe 100.
Yeah, and we that's a great point, David. We really were craving the signal that you get from customers paying you. And we found it really hard to delineate between, or to discriminate between different cohorts of customer feedback in the Ada days, because no one was paying us.
Yeah. So you got customers that were paying you, and then what did you do? Who decided? How did you go raise money?
I think in the very early days, we realized that in this B2B world, the importance of a product, the value of a product, really is best measured in its ability to get a key stakeholder promoted. And we picked up on that very early on. We realized that the budget owner, in this case, the VP of customer service, was investing in our technology for a reason. And one very useful way to measure the technology investment's success is their ability to go to their boss in their annual performance review and wow them. And so for us, what that translated into in the early days of Ada was all about cost savings as measured by something called deflection. How many people who are contacting me on a daily, annual, or even monthly basis are speaking to one of my very costly human resources? And that's where we came up with this whole concept of trying to maximize deflection. And we oriented the whole product and the whole business around driving deflection. And that it was a single KPI that our product was oriented to, that our business was monetizing, and that our outreach was focused around. And that was really what drove everything. And we started to see contracts being tied to the amount of deflection we were driving. We started to see new customers expand as we expanded the amount of deflection our product was facilitating for them. And it was really then that we started to build something repeatable and feel confident that if we were to put more fuel on this, we'd see ourselves a bigger return. And that's when we started to talk much more with Boris and Angela about, hey, should we put a round together? What would that look like?
And
I just want to just add one thing and just put it in context. Like, pivots are hard, right? But a 360-degree pivot that Ada did is is almost impossible, right? A lot of the pivots that we've seen in the past, think about Slack from gaming to collaboration tool, came out of internal tools that they had built, right, and saw that they worked really well. And then they basically took the internal tool and offered it to everybody else out there, right? But you already had a certain product market fit for a smaller audience, and then still as hard as it is, but you have something to start with. The Volley ADA team, Mike and David, they really started from scratch. I mean, there was nothing they could really take from Volley. I mean, perhaps some connections, but ultimately nothing from Volley. And what I think they did so incredibly well in the year that they went through the pivot and figuring out the product was talking to many people. Secondly, really understanding the problem extremely deeply, and then thirdly, taking all of that experience and the learnings that they've done through these two things a level higher, and thinking about how to best position, how can we solve that problem with a new product, right? And kind of, I just want to make sure that everybody understands also how incredibly tough that pivot was. It was not something to build on, right? Which is still tough, right? But it was really starting a company from scratch. I mean, literally, coming out of Volley, there was 2 founders, a little bit of cash left, but nothing else, right? I mean, that's how it started, and basically you started a startup from scratch on a reduced timeline and reduced cash.
So, and I'm going to ask one more question. I think I might have to do a follow-up call with you guys to get to the ADA portion, because I do want to get to ADA because I do want to get some of the questions there. But so let's just do this one more question. I'll get to audience. Boris, when they came to you and said we want to do a new round, what were you thinking? How did you help them get that round together?
So I think by then I think everybody had real conviction there was something there, right? I mean, we had first customers, we got incredibly good feedback from those customers. It was still early, but we ultimately, and we introduced them to a few funds. Funny enough, the fund that led the seed in the end, Bessemer, wasn't even one of them. I think you got to them or they reached out. I don't even know how that story happened, but we introduced them to a few funds, and certainly we're committed to do our own share of the seed round, right? But by then, I think it was that's almost a hard. I mean, by then, I think everybody was confident something was there. Nobody realized it would be so successful, what played out over the last 3 years, but I think everybody was confident that we had something that would work.
Cool. And just tell us how that first round came together, and that was about 4 years ago now, or the second round, the seed round. So did Bessemer let it? How did they? Was that inbound? What happened to the intros that Boris made? And just give us some insight.
We actually met Bessemer through Volley. So it all kind of came full circle. Ben Matthews at Bessemer and Brian Feinstein, who's on our board, they were active Volley users, and so we got to know them pretty well through that experience. And the rest is sort of history. We developed a decent relationship and started to spend a lot more time together. And I think when we showed them the traction that we started to have coming out of this pivot, it was pretty compelling, I think, in their eyes.
Cool. I have 100 more questions, so maybe we'll have to do a follow-up one.
Yeah, let me just say one quick thing here, Alex. I think it's important when we have an audience in Toronto. One of the things that I think is so important for us as a community to keep in mind here, and I think we can learn from Volley and subsequently Ada's experience, is the importance of fellow founders supporting each other in the early days of customer development. I think that is just something that we, Boris, David, Angela, and I are so grateful for. Fellow founders picking up the phone when we called them to ask about their problems. And I really hope everyone, we certainly have been and will continue to pay that forward. And I really hope that the community as a whole continues to do that because it's by answering the phone and providing honest feedback about that early problem discovery phase that we elevate ourselves and our community, and we'll get more ADAs.
Excellent. And that's I as I completely wholeheartedly believe that. That's one reason we do this, so you can share this knowledge. And I actually think most people would like to probably hear more recent stuff, but I think what you went through today is just so insightful. It's the unvarnished truth. Everyone, so you see this huge financing around the middle of COVID, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is an overnight success." This is real work. I'll get to some of the questions I see out there. Julia has asked a bunch. One that you asked a few minutes ago, I think is really very interesting. Is, as a founder, how do you recognize when an investor truly invests in a founder-first fashion way?
Something we do often is we talk to founders who are already working with that investor. And that often tells you a lot. And investors know that founders do that. They expect that founders are doing that. And that tells you a lot. You ask about the relationship they have, ask about the times when things were down that they supported, and how they behave when things are going really well. Tells you a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, I think even building on that, I think it's even more important is understanding what the founder-funder relationship is when things aren't going well in the business. I think that's particularly revealing, and something that I encourage all founders to screen for when you're interviewing your future board members.
I personally vouch for Angela and Boris.
Saw a question from Jason. He wants to know how early the customer is Wealthsimple.
Very early. I wanted to touch on this, but it didn't seem like people were interested in hearing about it. But I want to talk about two things to do with our product. The first is that I think there's an idea that you need to have a fully finished product for it to be successful or find any fit. And when Wealthsimple started using our product, we had no chat front end to our product at all. So if you wanted to interact with this, you had to use an API. So they built an Android front end inside of their app just to make use of this. It had no analytics, had no documentation. The documentation was me sitting in Slack with their lead engineer. So I just want to make it clear that, one, you don't need the full finished product to get some traction. And if you found something that's valuable enough, they'll lean into it. And that's what Wealthsimple did.
So David, so can I just interrupt here? So there's a lot of debate between an MVP and an MLP. So it sounds like you even say even an MVP's overdoing it.
I've never heard of MLP, so you're not talking about
that. A minimal lovable product, something that's polished enough that people can't put it down.
For us, it was like minimal cash product. Like what is Wealthsimple willing to give us $500 a month for? And that's how much they paid for it. So and they did, and they could use it. They used it every day. So we built a great content editor. We leaned into the parts that were really important, which was topic recognition, making sure we got that really right. Because if you don't, then the customer's gonna have a terrible experience. And making sure they could edit the content whenever they needed to, and making sure that API was rock solid and never went down. That's what we did.
Cool. From Quinn, how do you quantify your deflection or the value you created for elevating the key stakeholder? What is a cost savings chart like? Yeah, how do you know you're delivering against what you want to deliver?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple business case for Ada. The average, pick a telco, they do 30 million phone calls a year from their customer base. They spend $10 literally on each phone call. And Ada's technology today can automate 80% of those phone calls. So in the early days we were trying to automate between 10 and 20%. But even a single deflection of a $10 phone call is considerable considerable savings when you haven't generated a single dollar in revenue. So that's how we measured it in the early days. And what's since happened is Ada's value proposition has expanded. What we now do is we help businesses turn their cost centers into revenue drivers, and we do that by not only reducing costs, but by increasing customer satisfaction and by automating transactional revenue.
Very cool. See one here from, I think it's Abhishek. What's your competitive advantage long term?
Well, I think there's a few things that we think about in the competitive advantage long term for Ada. One is the number of conversations. There's a data network effect for us that I think is a real data network effect in contrast to what we saw with Volley. We automated the other day 100 million messages in a single day.
Wow.
And the scale at which we're now operating is allowing us to learn a lot at a greater pace than we ever have been before from our historical conversations. So that's one thing. The second thing that we think about as our differentiator is we really view Ada as the operating system for your customer experience. And our clients increasingly use us that way. They are building new teams to live inside Ada that allow them to reduce costs, increase CSAT, and drive revenue. And we really just give them levers that allow them to do that at various points of their business, at various points of their business trajectory and their business strategy. Right now, because of COVID, everyone is leaning into that first lever, the cost savings lever. But I think what David's product leadership has done such an incredible job of is making those levers easy to use. These are non-technical teams that are actually pulling these levers in this operating system of ours. And that's what's enabled so much of our success.
Cool. I'm going to ask, sorry, go on, David, you had something to add there?
No, it's just one of our we identified a couple of things that became our secrets, and that was one of them. That if we leaned into making sure that this thing could be used by support agents, not necessarily people that were using other automation tools, that it would be more valuable for organizations, and that's been true.
Cool. So we didn't get to all the questions. I might get the team to send them to you and get the answers up by social media, but I'll ask one, what I call a pre-COVID question by Craig. Who's the best runner between the three of you? It's very important. We all know. Yeah, I actually, from what I see in social media, I think it's Boris when it comes to at least the trail running.
No. Wait. I'm running in a different age category, so I'm out of competition between these two. I'm the winner in the.
I know who's the worst.
5 to 50 category.
So I know I'm the worst for sure. No question.
We should start when the pandemic's over, we got to start up the Run Club again. We'll host the Ada Run Club, and Craig, we'd love to see you there.
I'm in.
You too, Alex.
Yeah. So look, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to answer the questions.
Hey, Alex, sorry, 1 second. One last quick shout out.
Yeah.
Everyone's at home right now, and probably also knows this is a really tough time for some e-commerce companies. Let's all do our part and support some of our local founders who have started some increasingly iconic Canadian e-commerce brands. That means see if you can pick up a gift for a loved one at home from the jury. See if you can pick up some comfortable quarantine swag from KOTN.com. And let's all try to do our part to help everyone through this difficult time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. And also the good thing is Amazon doesn't ship anything quickly anymore. So it's probably faster to support a local company. Yeah, I was looking for a lot of stuff for my kids yesterday. So a lot of different e-commerce companies. So thank you all. You can go network. We're going to keep it open until 1:30. And once again, Mike, David, and Boris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
That's great. Thank you.